I spent $4,500 on a princess-themed party for my daughter. But when we arrived, the banner said, "Happy birthday, Emma." My sister's daughter. Mom smiled. It made sense to combine them. My daughter's crown slipped as she started crying. I shut off the music, packed the gifts, and by evening, every relative was calling me to fix the drama. I, 34M, never expected my own family to pull a stunt like this, but considering our history, I really should have seen the signs. For context, I am a single father to a little girl who recently turned 7. Since gaining full custody of her 3 years ago, my entire world has revolved around making sure she feels loved, secure, and prioritized. It has just been the two of us against the world. My sister, on the other hand, has always been my mother's absolute favorite. She is the golden child who can do no wrong, and her daughter, my niece, is treated as the undisputed princess of the family. I have always tolerated this blatant favoritism for the sake of keeping the peace, but I always drew a firm line when it came to my own child. For my daughter's 7th birthday, she asked for a massive, immersive, princess-themed party. She had had a rough year adjusting to a new school, and I wanted to give her a magical day. I spent an entire year saving up for it. I picked up extra shifts, sacrificed my own hobbies, and meticulously planned every single detail. The total budget came out to exactly $4,500. This covered a high-end private venue, professional character actors, a custom 2-tier cake, premium catering, and custom decorations tailored specifically to my daughter's favorite colors and stories. I handled all the booking and payments myself. My mother had offered to help coordinate with the venue on the morning of the party, so I could focus on getting my daughter dressed and ready, which I gratefully accepted. That was my first and biggest mistake. The party was scheduled to start at noon on a Saturday. My daughter and I arrived 15 minutes early. She was wearing a beautiful replica gown we had picked out together, and she was practically vibrating with excitement. I held her hand as we walked through the double doors of the venue, expecting to see a winter wonderland theme dedicated to my child. Instead, the first thing I saw was a massive, glittering banner draped across the main hall that congratulated my niece on her birthday. My niece's name was plastered everywhere. It was on the centerpieces, on the welcome signs, and most devastatingly, piped in thick icing across the massive custom cake I had ordered. My niece was already there, running around in a tiara, while my sister sat comfortably at a VIP table I had rented, accepting early gifts from a few relatives who had already arrived. My daughter stopped dead in her tracks. I felt her small hand tighten around my fingers. Her little plastic crown literally slipped sideways on her head as she looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears, asking silently why her cousin's name was at her party. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Before I could even speak, my mother hurried over to us. She approached me with a serene, self-satisfied smile, completely ignoring the tears welling up in my daughter's eyes. She casually explained that it made perfect sense to combine the events. She reasoned that since both girls were turning 7 within weeks of each other, and since I had already spent so much money on such a beautiful setup, it was the perfect opportunity for the family to celebrate them together. She added that my sister had been stressed about planning a party for my niece, so my mother had simply taken the initiative to alter the decorations and the cake to accommodate both of them, though heavily favoring my niece to make her feel special. I stared at her, my blood turning to ice. I calmly pointed out that I had paid for absolutely everything myself, tailored entirely to my daughter, without a single cent of contribution from her or my sister. I stated that she had hijacked my daughter's special day. My mother dismissively waved her hand, telling me that family shares, that I had plenty of money, and that I was being terribly selfish for trying to exclude my niece from a fun day. My sister then walked over, laughing, and suggested that my daughter should just go play and stop being dramatic. That was the breaking point. I did not yell, and I did not make a scene. I simply turned to the venue coordinator, who was standing awkwardly nearby, and informed him that the party was officially over. I instructed him to cut the music immediately and turn on the harsh overhead cleaning lights. He looked panicked but complied, and the cheerful princess music abruptly stopped, replaced by the jarring hum of fluorescent bulbs. I then walked straight to the gift table. I grabbed a large box of presents I had brought from my daughter's friends at school, tucked them under my arm, and scooped my crying daughter up into my other arm. My mother and sister started following me, their smugness instantly shifting to panic. My mother demanded to know what I was doing, insisting that guests were arriving and the food was coming out. I coldly informed her that she and my sister could enjoy the empty room. But since I had paid for the catering and the character actors, I was canceling them on the spot. I had already texted the catering manager and the entertainment company, invoking the cancellation clauses I had signed, instructing them not to set up. I carried my daughter out to the car, leaving my mother and sister standing in a silent, brightly lit hall with absolutely nothing but a banner and a cake. The drive home was heartbreaking. I spent the entire time reassuring my daughter that she had done nothing wrong and promising her that I would make it right. By the time evening rolled around, my phone was a nightmare. Every single relative was calling and texting me to fix the drama. My uncles, aunts, and cousins left voicemails accusing me of traumatizing my niece, ruining a family gathering, and being a petty, cruel father. My sister sent me a massive paragraph detailing how I had humiliated her in front of her friends who had shown up to a canceled party. My mother left a tearful voicemail claiming I had broken her heart and demanding I reimburse my sister for the emotional distress caused to my niece. I ignored all of them. I ordered my daughter's favorite takeout, built a massive blanket fort in our living room, and we watched movies until she fell asleep. Once she was in bed, I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began planning my revenge. Update 1. It has been a week since the disastrous party attempt, and a lot has happened. First and foremost, I needed to understand exactly how my mother had managed to change all my vendor orders without my authorization. I spent the entire following Monday on the phone with the venue manager, the bakery, and the decoration supplier. The venue manager was incredibly apologetic. He explained that my mother had called them 3 days before the event, claiming to be my official event planner. Because she had my full name, the booking reference numbers, and the exact details of the contracts, they assumed she was authorized to make changes. She had instructed the bakery to scrape off my daughter's name and replace it with my niece's, claiming there had been a terrible miscommunication on my end. She had also intercepted the decorator, paying them a small cash bribe to swap the custom banners I had ordered with ones she had purchased herself. I informed the venue manager that my mother had committed fraud by impersonating an authorized representative and making changes to a contract she had no financial stake in. I noted that their failure to verify this with the primary cardholder was a massive breach of contract. Facing the threat of a chargeback for the entire venue fee, the manager panicked and agreed to refund me 50% of the venue cost immediately, while shifting the blame entirely onto my mother's deception. The bakery and decorators, realizing they had been duped, also offered partial refunds and provided me with written statements detailing exactly what my mother had told them. I now had a paper trail proving my mother's premeditated sabotage. While I was gathering this evidence, the family group chat was still a war zone. My mother was spinning a narrative that I had suffered a mental breakdown at the venue and forced my daughter to leave a beautiful party out of pure spite. My sister was playing the ultimate victim, claiming her daughter was having nightmares because of my cruelty. I remained completely silent in the group chat, refusing to defend myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. However, one detail kept bothering me. My sister's husband is a pragmatic, financially strict guy who works in logistics. He had not attended the party because he was on a business trip, and he had been noticeably absent from the flying monkeys attacking my phone. I wondered why my sister hadn't simply thrown her own party for my niece if they wanted to celebrate so badly. I decided to do some digging. I reached out to a mutual friend of my sister and asked how their financial situation was. The friend reluctantly revealed that my sister had been bragging a month prior about a massive, expensive party she was planning for my niece, funded entirely by her husband. That was the missing puzzle piece. My sister had been given money by her husband to throw a party, but she had kept the money for herself and conspired with my mother to steal my fully funded party instead. Armed with this theory, I decided to bypass my sister entirely and contact my brother-in-law. I called him on his personal cell phone. He answered cautiously, clearly aware of the family drama, but unsure of the actual details. I asked him directly how his trip was, and then casually brought up the party. I told him it was a shame things had gone south, especially considering how much money he had supposedly given my sister for my niece's birthday. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He asked me, in a very tight, controlled voice, what I meant by that. I explained that I had paid $4,500 out of my own pocket for the venue, catering, and entertainment, and that my sister and mother had ambushed the event to make it about my niece. I mentioned that I was confused as I had heard he gave my sister $2,000 specifically for my niece's party. He coldly informed me that he had indeed transferred $2,000 into my sister's personal account 3 weeks ago for that exact purpose. I then forwarded him the emails from the venue, the written statements from the bakery and decorator, and screenshots of my own bank statements proving I had funded the entire event. I explained that his wife and my mother had conspired to steal my party, so his wife could pocket the $2,000 he had given her. I told him I was sorry to be the one to tell him, but I refused to be painted as the villain while his wife was committing financial infidelity. He thanked me curtly, promised he would look into it, and hung up. The revenge wheels were officially in motion. Update 2. The fallout from my conversation with my brother-in-law was spectacular and immediate. Just 2 days after we spoke, the family group chat went completely dead. The daily barrages of insults and guilt trips from my aunts and uncles ceased instantly. I later found out from a sympathetic cousin that my brother-in-law had come home from his trip and immediately audited my sister's bank accounts. He discovered that the $2,000 he had given her for the party had been spent entirely on designer handbags and a luxury spa weekend she had taken with her friends. When he confronted her with the financial evidence and the emails I had provided, she completely melted down. She tried to blame my mother, claiming it was my mother's idea to hijack my party so she wouldn't have to confess to spending the money. My brother-in-law, who absolutely despises lying, packed a bag and left the house to stay at a hotel. He informed the entire family via mass text exactly what my sister and mother had done, explicitly clearing my name and exposing their theft and manipulation. He stated he was evaluating the future of his marriage. The silence from my mother and sister was deafening, but I was not finished. Exposing them socially was satisfying, but it did not make me whole for the ruined day and the money I was still out, even after the partial refunds. I calculated my exact remaining losses, which came out to roughly $2,800 for the non-refundable deposits, the useless custom cake, the ruined decorations, and the emotional distress caused to my child. I hired a process server. On a Tuesday evening, while my mother and sister were having a frantic crisis meeting at my mother's house to figure out how to win my brother-in-law back, the process server knocked on the door. He handed them both official summons to appear in small claims court. I was suing them jointly for theft of services, tortious interference with a contract, and fraud. My phone rang less than 10 minutes later. It was my mother. For the first time in my life, she wasn't demanding or commanding. She was begging. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to her sobbing, pleading with me to drop the lawsuit, claiming she didn't have the money to fight me and that my sister was already on the verge of divorce. She asked how I could do this to my own blood. She tried to guilt-trip me by saying the stress was affecting her health. She even offered to write me an apology letter. I saved the voicemail to a secure cloud folder, backed it up, and went to bed sleeping more soundly than I had in years. I spent the next few weeks preparing my case meticulously. I organized the vendor statements, my bank records, the text messages showing my mother's manipulation, and even the timeline of my brother-in-law's discovery. I treated it like a full-time job. I wanted to ensure that when we stepped into that courtroom, there would be absolutely no room for their usual gaslighting or emotional manipulation. Meanwhile, I focused entirely on my daughter. I took the partial refunds I had received and booked a long weekend trip to a major theme park out of state. We flew down, stayed in a themed hotel, and she got to meet the actual characters she loved. I bought her a new, much nicer crown. When she smiled genuinely and brightly as we watched the fireworks over the castle, I knew that every ounce of stress and every bridge I was burning with my toxic family was completely worth it. She was my priority, and I was making sure she knew it. Update 3. The court date finally arrived. I walked into the courthouse wearing a sharp suit, carrying a meticulously organized binder with color-coded tabs. My mother and sister arrived, looking absolutely exhausted. My sister looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, and my mother had lost her usual arrogant posture. They sat at the defendant's table, refusing to make eye contact with me. When our case was called, the judge, a stern older woman with zero tolerance for nonsense, asked me to present my claim. I kept my emotions completely in check. I did not talk about favoritism or childhood trauma. I stuck purely to the facts. I explained the timeline, presented the receipts for the $4,500, and then handed over the written statements from the venue manager and the bakery, detailing how my mother had fraudulently impersonated me to alter the services I had purchased. I then presented the evidence that my sister had conspired with her, highlighting the motive by explaining the misappropriated funds from her husband, though I kept that brief as it bordered on hearsay for this specific claim. The judge reviewed the documents carefully, her brow furrowing deeper with every page she turned. She then looked over her glasses at my mother and asked her to explain herself. My mother immediately resorted to her usual tactics. She started crying, clutching a tissue, and launched into a rambling story about how family is important, how she was just trying to bring everyone together, and how I was a cruel son trying to bankrupt her over a simple misunderstanding. She claimed she thought she had my permission to make changes because she was my mother. The judge cut her off sharply. She noted that impersonating a contractor to alter financial agreements is not a family misunderstanding, but fraud. The judge then turned to my sister and asked what her role was. My sister stuttered, trying to claim she knew nothing about it and just showed up when she was told to. I calmly directed the judge to a tab in my binder containing a text message screenshot I had acquired from my sympathetic cousin, showing my sister bragging to the family a week before the party that she and our mother had a brilliant surprise plan for the venue. The judge had seen enough. She did not even need to deliberate. She delivered a scathing lecture to my mother and sister, stating that their behavior was legally reprehensible and morally bankrupt. She pointed out the sheer cruelty of hijacking a 7-year-old girl's birthday party for their own selfish financial gain. She ruled entirely in my favor. She ordered my mother and sister to pay me the remaining $2,800 I was owed, plus all my filing fees and court costs. She informed them that they had 30 days to produce a cashier's check, or she would authorize wage garnishments and place liens on their property. Walking out of that courtroom was the most liberating experience of my life. My mother tried to stop me in the hallway, grabbing my arm and frantically whispering that she couldn't afford it, that her savings were depleted, and that I was destroying the family. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. I told her that she destroyed the family the moment she decided my daughter's happiness was worth sacrificing for my sister's vanity. I advised her to figure out a payment plan, turned my back, and walked out into the sunlight. Update 4. It has been 3 months since the court ruling, and I feel like it is time to write the final chapter of this saga. The dust has finally settled, and the landscape of my life looks drastically different and infinitely better. My mother and sister failed to pay the judgment within the 30 days. They assumed I would soften and let it go. They were wrong. On day 31, I filed the paperwork to garnish my sister's wages and put a lien on my mother's car. The sheer panic that ensued was biblical. My mother was forced to take out a high-interest personal loan to pay me off to prevent her car from being seized. I received a certified cashier's check in the mail a week later for the full amount, plus the extra fees I had incurred enforcing the judgment. I took that money, opened a high-yield college savings account for my daughter, and deposited every single cent into it. It felt incredible to take their stolen money and secure my daughter's future with it. The family dynamic has completely fractured. But the truth is, the toxicity was removed, not the love. My brother-in-law officially filed for divorce from my sister. The financial infidelity with the party money was just the tip of the iceberg. His audit of their accounts revealed years of hidden credit card debt and reckless spending on her part. She is currently living in my mother's spare bedroom, complaining endlessly on social media about how she has been victimized by the men in her life. My mother is working a part-time retail job at her age to pay off the loan she had to take out to pay me, and she complains bitterly to anyone who will listen about her ungrateful son. The extended family, the aunts and uncles who initially attacked me, have entirely changed their tune. Once my brother-in-law exposed the truth and the court judgment became public knowledge, they realized they had been manipulated by my mother's lies. Several of them reached out with profound apologies, admitting they should have asked for my side of the story before launching their attacks. I accepted their apologies gracefully, but I have kept them at a healthy distance. I realize now that people who are so quick to turn on you without evidence are not people you want deeply involved in your life. As for me and my daughter, we are thriving. Cutting out the constant stress of navigating my mother's favoritism and my sister's narcissism has brought an immense sense of peace to our home. My daughter has completely forgotten about the disastrous venue incident. To her, her 7th birthday is remembered as the amazing weekend trip to the theme park, where she met real princesses and watched the fireworks with her dad. I learned a very hard lesson about boundaries, and the reality that blood does not automatically equal loyalty. But I also learned exactly how far I am willing to go to protect my child and demand respect. I stood my ground, I used the law, and I forced the people who tried to walk all over us to face absolute, unyielding consequences. I look at my daughter now, happy, confident, and completely unaware of the war I waged to protect her joy, and I know I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. The drama is fixed, the money is secured, and our lives have never been better.